Welcome to Jesus Changes Everything, a daily podcast dedicated to providing a fresh look at the ancient and glorious truth that Jesus not only reigns, but is busy about the business of bringing all things under subjection, that celebrates the wonder and the glory that he has been given all authority in heaven and on earth. It's not at all unusual for me to, when I go to Google, begin a Google search with, where are they now? I'm one of those people that loves to study up on what's become of so-and-so. And for this particular segment of Life in the Blender, I thought we're not going to do where are they now. We're going to do where were they then. Mm-hmm. Of course, because it's a Life in the Blender segment, I'm happy to welcome my precious wife. Dear, thank you for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
You betcha. Now, for a lot of people, at least, you know, one of the hardships that comes from having a public ministry is that people think that they know you.
Right.
And so for a lot of people, the me that existed before you became a visible part of my life was a professor, conference speaker, author, etc. Mm-hmm. And you came into my life, and now I'm a convicted felon for driving under the influence of kids in the car. Mm-hmm. I'm teaching as an adjunct for peanuts philosophy at a local community college. I've not been invited to a conference since, and I've got, you know, fresh new stuff, people speaking ugly about me on the internet, etc. And I really don't want people to get the idea that that's the reality. Mm-hmm. And that's why I think it's important for us to talk about where were they then. Mm-hmm. Because you know, dear, when you came into my life, that what people saw and what was real were not the same thing. Now, a lot of times for that, what that means is I presented myself in public as a Pharisee, whereas in private I was living like the prodigal son. And that's not what I'm trying to say. Certainly I had my sin issues. But even more important than my sin issues, which were real, I was deeply broken person. Mm-hmm. I was waiting to die. Mm-hmm. And part of that is living that image. Part of that is feeling that weight and that burden. And a part of it was just a desperate kind of, I don't want to say loneliness, but I do want to say aloneness. I don't know if there's a easy to see difference there, but in my mind there is a difference. The aloneness is, I'm not connecting with anybody. Mm-hmm. And you, during this time, were a lifeline to me. People don't realize this. We've told a little bit about the story long ago, but one part of the story is, for several months, there was a time when I would not communicate with you at all. Mm-hmm. But you communicated with me. Mm-hmm. I told you. I mean, I don't want you to think that you were, you know, overly pushy or anything. And I said don't, and you didn't listen.
Well, let's qualify that.
Okay.
When I reached out to you in the biggest crisis of my life, a 17-year marriage. At that time, it would have been 15 years. And a husband was plotting, leaving. A few months after that, was arrested. And you were giving me counsel.
Right.
And so when you had a scandal with Ashley Madison,
right,
you went silent. And But you did ask for me to let you know how this turned out.
Right.
So the communication was never asking you questions hoping you would answer.
No.
It was updating you
Yes.
with his court case.
Precisely. But what you didn't know at the time was it wasn't just feeding that itch to know what's going on with this court case meant so much to me. It didn't at all.
Right.
What mattered to me was the blessing of hearing your voice, the blessing of the wisdom that you would speak, because you would talk in your messages about your prayer life, and you were praising God, and how God was drawing near to you in these hard times. And and I would, every morning, I exercised. I know that's hard for people to believe. They saw me then, or even now. But I exercised every morning, and would take my phone, and I would walk around my neighborhood listening to your messages, because you would send them on voice most of the time.
Sometimes, yeah.
Yeah. And it was like the best part of my day. I knew
I never knew.
Right.
I never knew.
You knew I was listening.
Well, yeah, because I was sending it, and
Yes.
it would show that you seen it, but I never knew it was a
So
healing
meaningful to me.
balm
Yes.
of some sort.
Right. And now, those of you who are men who are listening can imagine just the sound of the voice. You could have been reading the phone book, and that voice would have just, made me roll my eyes back in the back of my head and melt.
So back to the aloneness. Because it is a real serious thing. When we are... I didn't have the fame that you had, but I was married to a physician.
Right.
And I was a medical person. And we had a common denominator of vocations, and we did things together, and we spoke together. And we went to various events, and I would do the nutritional component, and he would do the medical component. And we had a marriage that I thought was solid, when your wife died. And I think what you shared before, even before that, when you don't have that close relationship,
Emotional connection,
right?
Openness.
Yeah, and sometimes you don't even know how to express it. You just become two separate people.
Well, and as I told you, like roommates.
Right. That was your reference, was
Yes.
roommates.
And so, what I want people to get is the progress and the growth. And I think, as you were saying, for both of us, that we came together and found blessing. We came together and found each other. And
we came together and all hell broke loose.
well, that's true.
And I think what's been an interesting dynamic is people with obscure views of God, even who sit on the bench or preach, say, well, R.C. Sproul Jr., don't you know that your life blew up because you married this woman who's had, now, you're her fourth husband? Instead of, R.C. Sproul Jr., you mean you've been living in a hole and I never really knew you at all?
Right.
And that you're finally telling the truth about those things, and that God had to knock all these idols off of your life in order for you to become real. And the sad thing I remember saying to you is, when I had a spiritual insight that you were depressed, there was a weight on you, there was a heaviness on you, and God was revealing...
This was fairly early.
It was right on, because I had literally spent 14 days praying 7 to 10 hours a day. I've never in my life travailed in prayer and been led to pray for someone, praying you out of a grave. And it was like God visually showing me you'd voluntarily were in a grave. You wanted your life to be over, not because you lost a wife and you lost a daughter. You were coming to a reality that now you didn't even have that to hide behind. Now you had all these kids running the show, and you're hiding and still doing a little bit of traveling, but carrying this weight, and you just finally succumb to it and said, God, just take me.
Right.
And here I am, not knowing anything about that. And I remember saying to you, where are all your friends? How do they not see you're a depressed man?
Well,
you were like, how did you know that? I thought, how do they not? And they claim to be your friends.
I'm not sure I'm going to remember it exactly the same way, but very close, in that you said to me about the depression, and I thought it was I who said to you, how do you know that when none of my friends have said anything about that?
Right.
It's true. I knew it.
Right.
But nobody else has ever said it to me.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And that's what I'm saying.
Yes.
All these people that you say claim to have known you, claim to have been your friend, and I do think they were well-meaning people in your life,
right?
Who thought they probably knew you. But I've learned, being married long before you, people want to be attached to somebody they look up to. You know, David was a physician. People wanted to be attached to wealth, constantly having a concierge doctor on the line, on the phone. In your life, you know, for me, when they found out I was a dietitian, most people repent for everything they've eaten, and they want to talk to you. In your life, people are repenting for their sins, or they want you to help them with some physiological or psychological or some type of theological issue. And there's just, you're human. There's only so much in the well until you're dry, and everything that you've had in there has now been lifted out, and you got this empty well going on. Yes. And you're resigning your life. And God had, in an amazing, extraordinary, providential way, brought the two of us together.
Yes.
With all of our flaws, all of our faults. And it just ticked people off to the point where homes were ripped apart, you know, and your calamity was a blaming of, well, this is what happens. You know, we married 5 weeks early, right?
Yep.
And, you know, the hardship that we had gone through was, here I was, when I went through my divorce with David, I was not walked alongside at a church, and that particular church excommunicated me from the body of Christ, and I never knew it.
Right. Well, you never knew it because they never told you.
No, well, I never got a letter, but I did get 2 certified letters from them forcing me, giving me 30 days to go back to this man that they wouldn't even counsel because he had illicit life issues. And so we had that hardship. And I remember your dad saying to you, going through your presbytery, and your presbytery saying to you, you know, they basically own you. That's what you stepped into. They could tell you no, they could tell you yes. And you say, you know, I have a wedding date set for here. There was all this stalling going on. Some of those people were pastors over your adult kids who were saying, we don't like her. We don't like that our dad's moving on. We don't like how our dad's acting. But God saw a different thing. And your dad was like, son, pull out of there.
Yep.
I mean, they could say no. So you resign.
But which, again, gets mischaracterized.
Yes, it does.
Because I'm now in rebellion.
Right.
And I've said to everybody who's ever said that, show me one directive from the presbytery that I did not follow.
Right.
And as you said, as you just described it, I asked their permission
and
to let me go. And they gave it to me.
Right. And we've had to show those pastors who have even continued to gossip in that situation the dates to which they turned around and sent emails and said, oops, sorry. But that doesn't fix being a gossip or a liar.
Right.
But what it does do is they gave you permission to leave. And actually, one of those men was a groomsman in our wedding who was your co-pastor, who also gave permission for our wedding.
Yep.
And we decided we were going to get married 5 weeks early. It was a private ceremony. Nobody was invited. Your mom and dad knew about it. My mom and dad knew about it. And your sister and Dennis knew about it. And we didn't tell our kids because our kids were, some were very adult and some weren't, as far as chronological age. But some were destructive.
And hostile.
And very hostile and very horrifically mean. And so we decided that we were going to just have them at the public ceremony.
Right, exactly. Yep.
To which, they revolted against. And so the hardship with that, though, honey, is, and this is what I think we want our listeners to know, is that not just keen insight into who you are, into people's expectations that are unmet, but I want to share with you something very quickly. And I noticed this in my own life, long before you ever came. I remember, and I know that you were friends with Doug Phillips, but I remember when in the homeschool movement, Doug Phillips, Bodie Bauckham, they were all these people that were sought after. And women, mostly these things appeal to women because what they want to do is they want to drag their men to it, and they want their men to become like these men. And so they put people on pedestals. And then when those kingdoms come crashing down from hidden sin, I really think during that time when that particular thing happened with Vision Forum, most of the influence that I was around in my city, we all were like, the scales were pulled back and we thought, oh my gosh, we have been worshiping man. Those men are not responsible for the gospel being walked out in my life. I am.
Right.
Those men are now living and eating their sin and their idols. And what happened with you, and we can probably continue this at other times, was God was saying to you, RC, I have called you out from the dark, and you will not let go of this, and you will not let go of this, and I have so much for you. There is not room for alcohol, addictions, image. This is my kingdom you're building. Come along, and I will take you there. And those total invitations mean you recklessly abandon it. And you know what? We are just like Abraham. We didn't leave Ur of the Chaldeans with no family like God told him to do. We take a few with us. And it isn't until years that we finally drop them all off that God can fully use who we are and what we're doing and bring forth the things that he's doing. And just like in you and I, we've been married 4 years. We've had 2 deaths with our parents. You've had major job loss. We've had our finances flipped upside down. You've had 11 surgeries. I was your designated driver for a year. We've had attacks that the enemy meant for harm. And God is saying, what I'm doing is I am purging you, RC. I am purging you, Lisa. And I am bringing all of who I am into all of who you are. And there's not room for us both. So you both are going to get out of the way so I can drive the ship. And you and I both are stubborn. And we don't even recognize that we're the captains of our own ships. And God's saying, get out of the way. I'm going to use you and I need you. But hold on and follow me. And that's where we are, honey.
That's where we are.
That's right. That's where we are.
When you were saying, dear, that God was taking me out of this and calling me to walk this, all I could think of, and taking this away and taking that away, all I could think was how gracious he is to call me to walk this with you and not without you. You're precious to me.
And you're precious to me. And I want our listeners to know, you're in a marriage and you know that the enemy is coming at you with everything against you. Your health, your finances. Your finances are a big deal in a marriage. A lot of marriages break up. And the enemy has had authority to do certain things, but not beyond what God has allowed him to do. And there is nobody that I want to walk with in this earth besides you. Come hell or high water, we're in the ship together, and he is our captain.
Amen. I love you, sweetheart.
I love you.
You've been listening to the Jesus Changes Everything podcast, a production of Dunamis Fellowship, the teaching outreach of Dr. R.C. Sproul Jr. If you've enjoyed this podcast, we encourage you to subscribe, which you can do at all the usual outlets, to tell your friends, and to spread the word. To learn more about the work of Dunamis Fellowship, please visit rcsproulJR.com. And join us next time on Jesus Changes Everything.